Hey guys, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all doing very well. I just watched Young Royals season 3. Let's talk about it. So yes, Young Royals has returned with its third and final season on Netflix, and I literally just watched the season finale, so my emotions are all over the place. Like, everything is going wild in my head, and I can't wait to dive into my thoughts, feelings, reactions to season 3 of the show with you guys here in this video. So if that sounds good to you, then be sure to stick around, and as always, if you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to my channel and make sure you turn on your notifications so that you can be told when I upload next. Now, without further ado, guys, let's not even dilly-dally. We need to jump right into this. So Young Royal season 3 picks up right where we left off in season 2, where we got that bombastic ending. If there's one thing that Young Royals is gonna do, it's give us an incredible season finale. But in season 2, we got that amazing ending where, after all of the struggle and strife between Will and Simon, Will finally owned up. He stepped up to the plate in front of the entirety of the school, of the country, of the world, and reveals that it was in fact him as the other party in the scandalous video. Yes, the video that was seen around the world, at least within this show. And that was of him and Simon together. Something that was no one else's business, quite frankly. It was no one else's business, and there was nothing to see here. Okay, they needed to respect boundaries, but no. Instead, someone spread it across the school, and it almost torpedoed Simon and Will's life. But after seeing his love, Simon, go through so much struggle as he was singled out as the other party in the video, Will finally owned up and said, yes, it was me, I was the other one. And this is a lot to take in on its own, but it doesn't even include the fact that so much else is going on in Will's life. But when it comes to the big reveal surrounding the video, obviously Will taking that step, taking that ownership of his part of that whole scandal really helps his relationship with Simon. Simon no longer feels like he's alone. They feel like they're in it together, and it redeems their relationship. And you know, these guys, they're just so incredible together. We'll get into the cast, okay? We'll get into Academy Awards, Emmys, all sorts of awards deserved by this cast later on. But these guys are such a special couple, because when things are good, like, the highs are up here. The highs are literally like through the roof. Like, they are so amazing together. You buy into their relationship, their flirtation, their love. And so at the beginning, it seems like the clouds are starting to clear, because this huge scandal, even though it's still circulating the streets, at least they can go through it together. It's no longer only Simon's burden to bear. But as I said, the scandal surrounding the video is only one of Will's a million problems that he has to deal with, because unfortunately he is still the crown prince following the death of his older brother, and so he has to step up to the plate himself in other ways in terms of his royal duties. He is expected to act a certain way, look a certain way, and as time goes on and the firm tries to figure out how to incorporate Will in the next stages of their future plans for the monarchy, especially in light of a huge event that takes place, which we'll talk about in a minute, but Will has to figure out how to reconcile the person that he is in the school with Simon in the private little bubble that they have, with the crown prince that he is expected to be to his family and to the rest of the world. He is trying to figure out how to bring these two things together, and there are times when Simon doesn't necessarily agree with the decisions that he's making. For instance, Will's 17th birthday is coming up, and he has to choose a cause that he's supposed to be the patron of. We see this with a lot of royal family members. They're the patrons of things that are, you know, relatively speaking, uncontroversial, like young people and mental health. And for the longest time, like Kate Middleton, who is a hot topic right now, is a hot topic right now for various reasons, but she was like a patron of, early years and, motherhood, stuff that doesn't get anyone too offended, right? Because they're supposed to be impartial and whatnot, not politically involved. And so that's how these royal members work. And as Will is stepping up with his royal duties, he has to find something similar as crown prince. And meanwhile, Simon sees this as an opportunity for him to, stand up for something that really matters, something of substance. He does mention young people's mental health, which is obviously something that affects Will directly, as someone who suffers from, anxiety and perhaps even depression. Like, Will is going through it, okay, when it comes to his mental health. But Simon also suggests, what about patronizing an LGBTQIA organization to help others like us, okay, who are going through struggles and strife over their sexuality in society. And Will has a very visceral reaction to this, because he's like, I don't want that. I don't want to play the role of the quote queer prince who has to stand up for every single member of the community just because I happen to be with you. And I actually saw both sides of the argument on this one. Whilst I agreed with Simon that Will would be a really powerful symbol as a member of the royal family who was also a member of the LGBTQ community and actively, supported them, supporting the community, helping the community, especially in Sweden, I felt like that would be a really powerful symbol. And that's what these monarchs and members of the royal family are, right? Like, they're symbols of stuff, okay? It's just that they're too hesitant to be symbols of stuff of substance, because otherwise they're gonna get the guillotine if they make one wrong move. So that's why they just tend to tiptoe around, things that are less offensive and substantial. But in this case, Will isn't shying away from it necessarily because he's afraid of the guillotine. He's shying away from it because for his own sake, he just doesn't want to be that one go-to person every single time you think of the LGBTQ community. Like, he feels like there's more to him in terms of his identity and personhood. And I think that's a very valid argument to make. And also, he does point out that the fact that he is out and the fact that he is very openly in a relationship with Simon says enough. It's already a statement enough when it comes to, supporting the LGBTQ community in Sweden. But we see arguments like this between Will and Simon throughout the first 2/3 of season 3. They have these little quibbles, these little quabbles, and they dance around some of the underlying issues when it comes to their relationship. And as someone who is a huge fan of their relationship, as someone who's a massive fan of them as a couple, I didn't want to acknowledge these problems. I didn't want to acknowledge that. I was like, listen, la, I don't want to hear it. Yes, they have some fundamental differences. Yes, one of them is a socialist and he's from a working class family. He doesn't know half of the privileges that Will does. He's literally royalty and comes from one of the least meritocratic organizations in existence in the world. Like, of course there were some fundamental differences or whatever, but I didn't want to hear it. Like, I just wanted them to have their happily ever after. But yes, it's true that throughout the series we do see little quibbles, little quabbles. Who's more left wing, who's more right wing? It is sprinkled throughout. And so when the inevitable happens, it's not really a shock. It's not really a surprise, because it just turns out that these differences can't be ignored. No matter how high the highs are, the lows just increasingly become even lower. So as much as it pained me, as much as it hurt me to see Simon and Will be in these discussions and arguments and quibbles, I do think it ultimately served the greater purpose of actually strengthening their relationship and allowing us to see them discuss these really important topics, to really get down to the nitty-gritty of who each of them are and what they really want out of life and out of their relationship. So yeah, great writing all around. And another very interesting development that we need to discuss here and now when it came to Will's storyline was his freaking family, his parents, oh my god. Let's talk about the argument from episode 5. Let me just tell you right here, right now, Oscars were won that day. Oscars were won, Academy Awards, Emmys, Grammys, why not? Tony Awards, like literally a Brit Award or two, like a BAFTA, like literally so many awards were won that day. It was incredible. It was iconic. Edwin Riding delivered the performance of a lifetime. Every single episode, make no mistake, but especially for episode 5 of season 3, where he got into that room. He got on set and said, I'm gonna make history today, because the argument that he had with his parents on his birthday when Will turns 17 years old, and he has this very intimate dinner party with his parents, the king and queen of Sweden, and he's allowed to invite Simon, the love of his life, his boyfriend, who has caused so much struggle and strife in his life, but also brings him so much joy and happiness. And of course it was going to be tense. Of course it was going to be a little bit awkward. But even considering the fact that Will's parents are the king and queen, it was just a little bit too tense for my liking. It was just a little bit too awkward. Like, Simon was trying his best. He was really trying to carry the conversation. But Will is just looking at his mother, because the other development that I was talking about is the fact that his mother is sick and possibly even dying. Like, literally his mother is dying of a broken heart, seemingly from the death of her older son, Eric. This perfect kid. Oh, good old Eric. He was so perfect. He was destined to become king. First, we need to tackle the fight that was had in that room, in the palace that will never be the same again. The servants will never be the same again. The butler will never be the same again. Simon will never be the same again. And Will will absolutely never be the same again after that day. Okay, let's talk about the argument. So first off, Will was completely right. His parents abandoned him. The second that his older brother died, his parents were nowhere to be found. Will is trying to call his mother. First of all, he's worried about her because her health is declining. No one is telling him, what she has. They're not telling him any specifics. They're keeping everything very vague because, of course, she's the queen. But also, they're keeping him at an arm's distance, which doesn't make any sense considering he is now the sole heir, technically speaking, to the throne. But no, they're not giving him any information for what's going on, not even picking up the calls. And I understood that the mum wasn't going to be picking up the calls because she's sick. Like, she's sick. So yeah, maybe she can't pick up her phone and text and whatnot. WhatsApp is out of her reach right now. Fine. But the dad, I don't think enough was said about the dad being a flop. The Duke was a whole flop. Okay, throw him out of here. Get him out of here. The dad was not serious. Like, and the one time that he had a conversation with his son, it was like he was talking to an old chum. It was like he was talking to an old friend. He was like, oh, how's it going? Oh, yeah, like, I'm doing well too. Your mum, your mum's not great, but she'll pull through. It'll be okay. And then he gets interrupted by some rando in the background. He's like, oh, son, we'll just talk in the weekend when you come over for your birthday. Yeah, okay, cool. Chat to you later. All right. Mad! Actually crazy. These people are not qualified to be parents. It was crazy. So during the dinner party, when Will is sitting there staring at his mother, a lot of things are going through his mind. He is thinking of the last 3 seasons worth of trauma that his parents have put him through, particularly since the death of his older brother, where they have seemingly dumped a whole bunch of additional responsibility on him, expecting him to be the new perfect crown prince, the representative of the future of the Swedish monarchy. He is supposed to step in there and be note perfect. He can't make any mistakes, can't have no scandals, can't put a foot wrong, conceal, don't feel. Like, he's literally expected to be absolutely perfect. Meanwhile, he's received no guidance. He's received no help. He's received restrictions. He's received rules. He's been told what not to do, but hasn't really been given a lot of guidance and support on what to do, especially by the people who are most qualified to do so, i.e. the current head of the monarchy, his mother and his father, who, aside from that role, as his mum points out, the role of the boss, right? the role of the literal manager of the joint. Aside from that, even as his parents, they weren't able to deliver on providing him with that support. And this is not even taking into account the fact that not only does he have that added anxiety and pressure of having to step up to the plate as the crown prince now, but he's also mourning the loss of his older brother. Like, why is no one thinking about this? He's also mourning the loss of his older brother, and so he's devastated, as he says, with such passion and just, devastation. He is devastated. He is crushed. But no, mum is too busy dying of a broken heart to even pay attention to the loss and the struggle that her son is facing. Meanwhile, dad is literally, I don't know what he's doing. He's golfing with his buddies. I don't know what he's doing. I understand that he wants to support his wife. I understand that he's struggling with a broken heart himself because he's just lost his firstborn son. But they have 2 children. They have an heir and a spare. What the hell happened to the spare? And this always happens, mind you, even like in real royal families. I don't want to dive into that politics for too long because we're talking about this series, okay? But even in real royal families, it's kind of baffling because they have a clear hierarchical structure and they make it clear pretty much from birth that the oldest child is the priority because they're going to be the future monarch. So they are pampered and prepared to be the crown prince or princess so that they can take over one day. And then you have the second sibling that's just there as literally a spare. And so they often have wildly different experiences to their older siblings who have a lot more of an idea of their responsibilities and their role. The spare is just there, just in case something happens, and they're out here wilding out usually. But then when the time comes, when something does actually happen and you do in fact need the spare to step up, it's like, but they're not ready. Like, they're not prepared. Like, why weren't you preparing them the way that you were preparing the firstborn? I understand you don't want to exert all of your resources on just the spare. Like, they don't matter as much. But for the spare to be caught with their pants down like this, sorry, that's not an appropriate analogy. Hold on. That we shouldn't apply that analogy to Will. But for Will to be caught so unprepared is a crime, and it's a testament to the terrible planning and parenting of the Swedish royal family. So yeah, during that dinner party scene, we see years of anguish, of loneliness, of anxiety, of pressure just being released in full force as Will lets his parents have it, and I was jumping, frothing at the mouth, clapping along because it's exactly what he deserved. And I know that later he kind of apologizes, like, sorry, I shouldn't have talked to you guys that way. But I'm so glad that the mum, at least, I'm so glad that she stepped up and apologized as well, because really and truly he was completely right. The delivery was wild and hilarious and deserved. It doesn't change the fact that the message was absolutely spot on. He was completely correct. On top of all of this, as if this isn't already enough, Will is fuming, he's huffing, he's puffing, he's sweating, he's crying, storming, going to his room in the palace, and then he just lies down and he's like, I can't believe I've said that to them, but I had to. Like, his mind is just swimming right now, right? That's already enough. But then Simon, like, let's not forget that Simon was also in the room, and Simon was shook. And Simon, he goes to Will's room and he's like, listen, like, you were right to be honest with your parents. I respect that. But what I just saw in there was kind of wild. I didn't recognize you in there. I don't think that this is going to work. And as much as it broke my heart, me personally, as much as I was weeping, sobbing, tearing up, tearing out the hairs in my wig, I did understand Simon's perspective. I did, because I was like, you know what? At the end of the day, these guys are just kids. These guys are children. They're babies. This is too much for even adults to deal with. Literally, look at the mom. Look at the queen. The queen is literally dying of a broken heart. Like, she can't handle this. So imagine these little kids having to deal with all of this stress and pressure. And it's just too much. So I think Simon was well within his rights to just draw a line and say, this is too much for me. And later he elaborates and he says, it wasn't even you. It was the fact that your family just let you down to such an extent that I didn't see how this could continue. And again, I think that makes perfect sense, even though I was on the floor weeping in a ball. But I really respected Simon for drawing a line and a boundary when it came to what he could accept and deal with in his relationship with Will. And so that leads to them breaking up, which is just so awful. But on top of all of that, there's some school drama, which there often is, okay, when it comes to teen dramas like this. And that puts them in a weird position as well, because not only are they technically saying goodbye to their relationship, but also to the school, which represents all of the highs and lows of the time that they had together. But not all hope is lost, and before we get into the ending, we do need to shine the spotlight over to my guy Simon. My guy Simon. Oh, I love these two so much. Simon is an icon, actually. First of all, like I said, I really appreciated the fact that he drew lines. He drew boundaries for himself. Simon is a lovesick fool. They're both lovesick fools, okay? So they can get carried away, get impulsive, and Simon could just let his boat be, swashed and swished around in the river of Will. That's a weird analogy, but we move. He could have let that happen forever, like forever and a day. But from what he saw in that royal palace, he recognized how messed up things really were for Will back at home. And he had to make a decision for himself in that moment and say, I can't deal with this. It was very honest. It was very vulnerable, heartbreaking for everyone involved, including me, okay? But I really appreciated that decision because it led to Will doing some more introspection and really being honest with himself about what he wanted so that he could end up the way that he did in the end. We're gonna get to it, okay? But first, when it comes to Simon, I would say that his story isn't quite as rich and multifaceted as Will's is, and that's mostly as a function of the series. Will is the prince, like he's the one with the juicy storyline, so it makes sense that most of our attention is on him. But they did highlight the safety and security risks that Simon faced after being so exposed due to the scandal surrounding the video and the fact that the whole world now knows that the other party was Will. So it's an even bigger deal, actually, even though it helps that he doesn't have to deal with it on his own anymore. But the fact that Will is the other party and, he and Will are together means that Simon is very much in the spotlight within the show because people have all sorts of things to say and do about it. So he finds himself in some really sticky situations in terms of security, but also in terms of social media, where he is hit with a ton of hate, vile, disgusting comments being showered his way. And whilst it was really heartbreaking to see the character go through that and to see how that impacted his self-esteem, his mental health, and even his feelings towards hobbies and the things that he liked to do, like singing and music, which definitely were tempered by everything that was going on around him. It was so heartbreaking to see all of that. But just from a, writing and TV show perspective, I think it was a really powerful and insightful storyline to give the character. It was realistic because, those comments would have, definitely come out had this happened in real life. And it was really powerful to see the character kind of have to deal with all of that. It just made it feel really real and grounded. And I think that the writers, the directors, creators, and of course, Omar Rodberg, the amazing actor, did a stupendous job depicting this storyline. Now, another key storyline in Simon's life was his relationship with his sister. That was very much broken, okay? It was definitely destroyed after the events of season 2, where his sister was revealed as a huge traitor to him. And for most of season 3, he just can't get over it. It's like their relationship is completely ruined. He can't find it within himself to forgive her for what she did. And she, in fact, ends up moving out of their mother's house to join their father, who he has his own situation going on, but he tries to cater to to Sarah. He tries to turn a new leaf, but then it's revealed that he's the same old alcoholic father. And Sarah has to kind of come to terms with that in the most painful way. But back to Simon. Back to Simon. Obviously, it's really hard for him to have to go through these troubles at home on top of everything else that's going on with Will, because it feels like he doesn't even have his village behind him. I do think, you know, this feeling of being alone and not having his usual support network would have definitely contributed to, you know, him not feeling like he's equipped to deal with the struggles that Will was facing on top of everything. And to be honest, if we're gonna keep it a buck, even when these two were at their highest points, when they were on cloud nine, in love with each other, so romantic, so beautiful, so perfect, you could definitely tell that Simon was doing a lot of the heavy lifting emotionally. Like I said before, they had these little quibbles and quabbles here and there all throughout season 3, and they were kind of dancing around some pretty big issues that got to the root of their, you know, differences in terms of culture, in terms of, you know, social class, in terms of everything. And oftentimes it was Simon that had to concede in these arguments. It was him that kind of had to back down when he pointed out that Will wasn't very, you know, socially aware, that he wasn't aware of a lot of the privileges that he has as a prince. Simon kind of had to back down on that because Will was like, oh, it's not as easy as you think. And like, yeah, it's not. Like, we saw that. We were there at your birthday party, Will. Okay, it's not as easy as we think. But like, you're a prince, like, but like, Simon was like, I've had to work since I was 14 years old just to like eat, like, it's just to like have clothes, like, it's, and we never really got to the bottom of that. And Will was never really socially conscious enough to dive into that because he was wrapped up in his own problems. So like, Simon made points, but we couldn't really acknowledge it because Will was in his Will tornado. So that's just one example of when Simon kind of had to put himself aside, parts of his own identity and, you know, personality aside, so that he could make the relationship with Will work. And again, this is great writing because that ultimate breakup did not come out of nowhere. There were signs sprinkled throughout. Even if some of us wanted to just go in blind and not see the problems, they were there. They were there all along. Which meant, of course, that the only way that this relationship would actually work, like if we really wanted them to be together, something had to give, and it had to be Will's crown, which he actually gave away. Oh my goodness, in the season finale, Will is in the car watching his friends or ex-friends celebrate their graduation and the last day of the school existing, potentially, if they don't win that appeal. But he's just watching them live their lives. And he's sitting there with his parents, and he just has to say it. Do you know what I mean? Like, he has to bring up the conversation again. And he says, you know, what if I didn't want to be king, actually? What if I didn't want to be king? What if I didn't want any of this? And his mom is like, oh my God, you're going to give me another migraine. Like, she's like, you're going to cause another event. Like, you're going to cut off several more years of my life. Please don't do this to me. And he's just like, I'm not trying to upset anyone. I'm not trying to start drama. I'm not going to throw boxes around. Like, where are the boxes? I don't have anything to throw around. I'm just asking questions. Like, let's keep it real. What would happen if I didn't want this? You know, you never actually asked me. It always started an argument. We never actually discussed this, and so discuss it they do. And he says, really and truly, if you really want to see the longevity of the monarchy and blah, 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 you'll set aside the fact that I'm your son and you'll give it to the right person, which is, in my opinion, not August, although that's who they point to on the show, but whatever. But he says, just give it to August and leave me alone so that I can be with Simon, low-key. And his mom's like, is this about Simon? Like, everyone in the room, including me, is like, is this about Simon? And he's like, no. He's like, no, it's not about Simon, I promise. Of course it's kind of about Simon, but also it's about him, because we've literally seen this kid have panic attacks, anxiety attacks. Like he has struggled with this role from day one. The reason why he was in that school is because he was such a party boy and a bad boy prince, and he really just was not cut out for the royal lifestyle. That's why he was put in that school to begin with, although that just made matters worse. But yeah, from the very beginning, it's always been a part of his character that he hasn't been suited for the lifestyle that he was born into. And so at the very end of the story, you see him finally do something about this, make the ultimate decision that he knows himself he's not going to change his mind on, and abdicates from the throne. And then he runs faster than I've ever seen anyone run before ever in my life. He runs towards this old beat up car that used to belong to Sarah and Simon's father, and he's calling out Simon's name. And then Simon hears him, and then they stop the car. He gets out of the car and he tells them, I'm not going to be king. Like, I'm not doing it. It's actually not happening. And the rest is history. They hug and the rest is history. We get this montage of them all throughout the years, seasons of the show. And it's the most magical thing in the world. What do you want me to say? Like, it's literally the most perfect thing to have ever existed. And they are the most perfect couple to have ever been brought to the screen. So that's all, folks. That's the end of the series. That is how you wrap up a show. Young Royals, okay, the Swedes have shown us how to deliver on excellent storytelling from start to finish with this teen drama. Honestly, the other teen dramas could stand to learn a couple of lessons. Honestly, looking at you, Blood and Water. Okay, if you're going to wrap things up in season 4, 5, wherever they're at right now, then watch Young Royals to see how it's done, because this is a masterful final season for the show. Like, it was absolutely brilliant. Even in the times where I disliked seeing Simon and Will argue, and that happened a lot, especially in seasons 2 and 3, with this incredible and euphoric ending, it all feels worth it. It feels like they were really able to tackle all of their struggles and address all of these concerns, so that the final ending with them being together happily ever after feels so earned and so brilliant, and like I said, euphoric. Like, this is how it's done. The Swedes have showed us how it's done. I hope the rest of you guys are taking notes. And another thing that's pretty impressive when it comes to this series is that even though obviously Simon and Will were number one, like they were number one priority throughout, I do think that the series did a pretty good job with the C, D, E, F, etc. plot lines enough to at least keep me engaged, because the storyline surrounding the school closing down was actually hilarious. And I couldn't help but think when I was watching the storyline play out that there are several schools, actually there are several schools from these teen dramas that need to be closed down. I love the fact that it's Young Royals that actually proposed the idea of just shutting down the school because crazy things keep happening. But like, this is exactly what needs to happen to the school from Blood and Water. The school from Blood and Water. And if you even look back, the schools from like the Vampire Diaries, like all of these teen drama schools needed to have been shut down ages ago, actually. So yeah, I do respect the fact that once again, the Swedes knew what needed to be done, and they were like, we need to close down this school immediately. The authorities did a whole investigation, and they weren't fooled by the play acting. They weren't fooled by the students acting like they were angels and signing petitions. It took one tour around that school, and they also had a very insightful interview with Felice, and they decided to wrap things up. They were like, we need to close this place down. Now, this all started, of course, when rumors spread of an initiation event that took place years ago, where the first years were made to do horrific things that I won't even spell out in this video, but like, it was appalling. It was all part of the school's kind of toxic culture, where they have all of these traditions surrounding the third years, humiliating the first years, and some of those traditions even play out, post the investigation where the third years get served by the first years for their final dinner and stuff like that. So the school definitely had a very toxic culture in its undercurrent, and the students that benefited from this culture or never saw a problem with it were happy to have the school stick around and not change and just be a continuation of these traditions. But some people who had been on the receiving end of this horrific behavior, like Felice, but also August, to be fair, because he also had some trauma of his own, some of these students were actually raising some valid questions about, why do we want this school to stay open considering everything that's happened here? But I think this was a really interesting discussion. I think it speaks to the very real toxic environment that boarding schools can be. In real life, you hear about these crazy stories of what happens in boarding schools. And so to see the series kind of tackle that, because so much of it takes place in this very prestigious elitist school, I think was very clever, and it was delivered pretty well. And again, the Swedes committed. The Swedes committed. They said, when we say we're going to shut down the school, we mean we're going to shut down the school. And yes, the school has a chance to appeal or whatever, and they have some very powerful patrons, because a lot of the students there are from very powerful families of nobility and stature in society and blah blah blah. So maybe they'll have a chance in the appeal stage. But the fact that the government, the fact that the authorities actually went there and said we're banning the school from even opening, is pretty iconic to me. So overall, I would say that most of the tertiary storylines, like the school closing and like Sarah grappling with the consequences of her own actions, and even the storyline surrounding August going through it on all different fronts, I would say that those storylines were really great, very well written, brilliantly acted, and pretty well delivered overall. But there was one storyline that I think was a little bit disappointing, and that was that of Felice. I wanted to see more of her exploring her own issues instead of being there holding other people's hands, sometimes literally when she was giving Will a manicure. But yeah, it's a shame that her issues kind of got overshadowed with the whole school drama. She is the one that the inspectors decide to interview, and the new head teacher, another new head teacher, just like blood and water, okay, but this one seems to be a little bit more effective, although the school did get closed down. So was she? She even tries to warm up to Felice so that she could be the token black girl, basically the token mixed race girl, to represent the diversity of the school. Even though she's literally one of the only people of color in that school, they want to kind of put her up front to present themselves in the best possible politically correct light. But instead of feeding into that game, instead of playing by their rules, Felice does what she wants to do, what her heart tells her is the right thing, and that is tell the truth to the inspectors. And that's definitely, contributed to the closing of the school. But she was completely correct, and I wish that the writers had been better equipped at dealing with her storyline, because they kind of surmise a lot of the issues and qualms that she has to her having to straighten her hair and not being allowed to wear her curly hair down. And yes, this is an example of a racially motivated microaggression, but I wish the series made it clearer that that was just one part of a bigger problem that was happening in the school. And I think one way that they could have done that is if they had kind of reflected on Felice and other POC students' experiences. But instead they made it seem like she was the only black girl in the school, even though you do see other POC characters, and it made it seem like her experiences were unique and pretty minor, when we could have had a deeper discussion on class and race and the intersections between that were going on in that cesspool of a school. But listen, overall guys, I really enjoyed season 3 of Young Royals, and I'm absolutely gutted that the series is over, even though they gave me the perfect happily ever after. I literally could not ask for more. I was devastated when they broke up. You guys don't understand. I was devastated. I was crying, weeping, sobbing, rocking back and forth in a corner. Like, what do you mean? What do you mean I'm not going to get my happily ever after? But in the end, I won. In the end, I won. The sun was shining, the birds were singing, there wasn't a single cloud in the sky. Like, I literally won. I literally won. They're together. And not only are they together, but Will made the ultimate sacrifice, showing his selflessness, showing just how in it he was and how committed he was to Simon, but also to himself and what he wanted for his own future. Ooh, I won in every way, actually. Literally, I just kept winning with this show. So yeah, it's bittersweet, but what can I say? I mean, this is a brilliant example of great storytelling for a series from start to finish. It feels like the creators had a plan when it came to this show. They had a beginning, middle and end, and they absolutely delivered. And it certainly helps that they had an amazing cast to work with. In particular, of course, we have the two lead boys, Edwin Riding and Omar Rudberg, who are just electric on screen for all 3 seasons. You want to talk about an iconic couple on television, they need to be a part of that conversation. And like I said, Oscars were won. Oscars, Grammys, BAFTAs, whatever they give out in Sweden, Nobel prizes were won. Okay, because they were truly iconic in their respective roles, and I genuinely will miss them as characters. Although because of the brilliant ending, I'd be more than happy to rewind back to season 1 to see where it all began. And so guys, with all of that being said, I'm going to be giving Young Royals season 3 an 8 out of 10. And of course, because this is the final season of the show, I'm going to give an overall rating for all 3 seasons of Young Royals as an 8.5 out of 10. So that's it from me, guys. Now that I told you guys my thoughts on Young Royals season 3, the final season of one of the best things that Netflix.com has ever produced, it's time for you guys to let me know what you thought of this series down in the comments below. Please be sure to subscribe to catch new videos coming up. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.